The Employees Provident Funds and Miscellaneous Provisions Act. So we are going to talk about the Employees Provident Fund Act. So under Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Act, we have different acts. So one is the Employee Provident Fund Act, another one is a Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme Act, and another one is Miscellaneous Provision Act. So we will be seeing each act under each different videos. So first focus on the Employee Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provision Act. So how this act has been come into existence? It is one of the major social security act which is being enacted in order to protect the employees by making them contribute. So the habit of saving has been inculcated under this act. So employee who is earning now after his retirement will not have the income. So what should be done? So in order to protect or save his economic status, the particular act has been enacted where there he is making a contribution. So every month he will be making some contributions which will be paid to him at the time of his retirement or retrenchment or closure or his incapability to earn or after his death to his family members. So this is one of the major act, and it is covering the industries like manufacturing industry or like cement or cigar industries, mechanical or all the industries, even non-commercial, non-factory establishments, like we call them as the commercial sectors, they are also coming under this act. So the main target is it is extending some services to the employee or to his survivors, and this is as referred as a contributory provident fund. So there is a compulsory contribution to be made by the employee, and that particular compensation amount which is compulsorily contributed will be covering as a pensionary packages, and also there is a deposit linked insurance, and this is also coming under this EPF scheme where there is an integrated manner, they are being combined together. And this law is a self-applying law where there is an implementation made. So even employees who are employers, even if they want, they can even go for self-complying basis. Sometimes you can voluntarily also come under this act. If you want, you can have the facility of this. And as I told you, there are three schemes. So first one is Employee Provident Scheme 1952, then Employees Pension Scheme 1995, that is it was called as a Family Pension Scheme under 1971, but now it is renamed as Employees Pension Scheme 1995. Then Employees Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme 1976. So all these acts are called as the miscellaneous provision, and this is act is applicable to whole of India, and any establishment or a factory which is engaged in any industry which is specified in schedule and in which 20 or more persons are being employed, or in case of employment of 20 or more persons on any such establishments which can be central government establishments and which has been specified as a industry which is coming under the purview of central government, and a notification has to be made in the official. Then the objective of this act is to give us social security, and it is covering the industrial workers and also the commercial sector workers. The act is giving benefit for their retirement. So after retirement, they are talking about the old age benefits and the provident fund benefit and superannuation pensions, invalidation pension, family pension, and the deposit linked insurance. So because sometimes if the employee is sick or he loses his capability to work, then he is retiring on that consequences, or he is going for a voluntary retirement or superannuation after attaining the age of retirement, or due to retrenchment or closure. So in such contingencies, some benefit is being given, and it is a lump sum benefit which is given under this act. The Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions has the combination of these three acts. So first one is Employees Provident Fund Scheme, and it was from the 4th March 1952. This act has come into existence. In the Employee Pension Scheme 1995, Then Employees Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme 1976. So as I told you, the objective is for a retirement benefit or superannuation benefit or family pension and deposit link insurance. So the focus is for their employees' welfare after the particular tenure of his and this act is not applicable to some of the cooperative sectors where people that is employees are less than 50 members and they are working without the aid of power. Then also not applicable to establishments which are coming to this act, and they can if the number of employees are falling below 20, and establishments which are under the state and central government and employees are also getting benefit in the form of nature of contributory PF, that is called as contributory provident fund, or they have some old age pension scheme as per the rules of the government. And the establishments which are set up under any central, provincial or state government, and also the employees are getting benefits in the nature of contributory provident fund or old age pension fund. This is with respect to Rule 16 subsection 1C. Then voluntary coverage. As I told you, if the establishment is not satisfying the above two conditions for coverage, then if the employer feels, and majority of the employees, they say yes, we want to be covered under the employee provident fund scheme, then they can go for applicability, and that particular establishment can apply for this thing, and they can get themselves registered, and that is called as voluntary coverage under section 1 subsection. Then what is meant by provident fund? This provident fund is nothing but it is like giving some provisions for the beneficiary, that is the future of the employees. So what they have is they have the habit of saving, inculcating. So it is like while earning you have to save for your future. That is the mantra of this particular act. So employees who are working, or what they do is they are having the habit of contributing some amount for their future benefit, which can be paid to them as a lump sum or for the pension scheme. So this is why the particular provident fund has been created, and we will see the definition. So there are a lot of definitions under this provident fund. So we have this appropriate government, which is called as section 2A. Here appropriate government means the central government, the cases where we have the control of business by the central government, and we have the establishments like a railway company, oil field, mine, or sometimes major ports, or also some establishments which is having branches in many states. So that is called as appropriate government, and this appropriate government can be central or the state government. Then authorized officer. So under section 2 subsection AA, who is an authorized officer? So the authorized officer means the person, we call him as the commissioner, that is a central provident fund commissioner, or he can be an additional central provident commissioner, or he can be a deputy provident commissioner, or he is called as a regional provident fund commissioner, or some other officers. So who are being said as an authorized officer by the official gazette in the central government notification, then we call them as an authorized officer. Then what is the basic wage? How to calculate the basic wage for the purpose of employee provident fund contribution? As we know, the contribution of wages is including the pay which is given for holidays, and also on leave also. So here we have to talk about the terms of contract of employee and what is the amount of payment made to him in the form of cash. So here the wages does not include any concession for food has been given in the form of cash value, or any dearness allowance, or any all cash payments, or we can call them as anything. So this dearness allowance, as we know, it is given only for the cost of living benefit, and any other thing like any other allowances which is given, like example we have this overtime allowance, or even you have the house rent allowance which is payable, and this is not the part of your basic wage. Then contribution, we know this contribution is a source where they get the money, and it is a payment made and by the member so under this act, and the contribution is a compulsory one which has to be made mandatorily by the employee to this provident fund scheme or this deposit linked insurance scheme. Then what are called as controlled industry under section 2 subsection 9? Then here controlled industry means a controlled industry is an industry which is controlled by the union government, that is based on the control by the act of the parliament declared, and this is controlled in order to have public interest. So any industry which is coming under schedule 1, that is under the Industrial Development and Regulation Act of 1951, and we have to control the industry because of the public interest, then particular industry is called as a control industry. Now question is, who is an employer? An employer can be directly the owner of the business or the agent of the business or the contractor of the business, or in case of the deceased owner, then the legal heir or who is having the control. So he is called as an employer and who is giving employment. Now the question is, who is an employee? So employee means he should be getting some wages for the work done, and it can be in the manual form or through some electronic sources, and he should be getting wages directly, or even he can get the wages from the indirectly also from the employer. So even we can talk about the contractual employers also. So here what is this? They are being a part of this, and Apprentice Act does not apply here, because a person one who is being under this act, Apprentice Act of 1988, they will not be coming under this, because there is no relationship as an employer-employee. Apprentices is learning. So he is not a part of an, he is not a player, he is not being there under the contract of employment. So he is not there as an employee. Now, who are the excluded employee who is not covered under? That is a person who is having some fund, and the particular employee has already withdrawn all the fund. Then he will not have the fund at all. So he cannot be called as an employee. Then you can call him as an excluded employee. Then regarding exempted employee means a person who is not coming under the scheme as the case may be, but their exemption is granted for them, then you call him as an exempted employee under section 227. Then what are establishments which are declared as esteem exempted establishments? So this is nothing but by the law or the provisions of this act, some grant of establishments are given that they are being establishments are being exempted, then they will not be coming under the purview of this particular act. Now this Employee Provident Fund Scheme 1952. So under the scheme, a person or an employee who is having some certain contributions, and that contribution should be equal to be paid by the employer also. So this employee, as I told you, will be getting some lump sum amount which is for his self contributions, and he will be getting it with an interest, and the contribution amount also it will be given at the time of retirement. Suppose if he is no more, then it will be given to his legal heir. So regarding this, a pay is more than 15,000 at the time of joining, then he is not eligible and is called as a non-eligible employee. And if an employee is drawing less than 15,000, then he can make mandatorily contribution to be for this fund, and he can become a member of this Employee Provident Fund Scheme. Then what about the contributions which is made by the employer and employee? So we know very well the contribution paid by the employer is always 20% of the basic wage plus dearness allowance plus retaining allowance. Same way, if you talk about the contribution, what is payable by the employee also. So he even has to contribute equal contribution. Suppose the establishment is having less than 20 employees, or they don't meet other conditions as notified by the Employee Provident Fund officers, then the contribution rate for both employee and employer can be restricted to 10%. We know that most of the employees of the private sector, the basic wage on which the contribution is made. For example, I have taken the example, if the monthly basic wage is 30,000, the employee contribution towards his or EPF would be rupees 3,600 a month. This is 12% of his basic wage, while the equal amount is to be contributed by the employer each month also. And it should however be noted that not all the employer's share moves into the EPF kitty. So out of employer's contribution, 8.33% will be directed to employees provident fund. So out of this contribution itself there is a segregation, and it is calculated as 15,000. So for every employee with a basic pay equal to 15,000 or more, the diversion is 1,250 each month into employee provident scheme. If the basic pay is less than 15,000, then they will be contributing 8.33% of that full amount. That will be going into APS amount. So this is how they have going for segregations. So the balance amount will be retained by the employee provident fund scheme, and this will be given to the employee on his retirement. Suppose the employee is making voluntary pay, so more than this stipulated pay, if he is making higher contribution above the statutory rate of 12% of his basic pay, then you call it as a voluntary provident fund contribution, which can be accounted separately. And we have to note here, under the Income Tax Act 1961, the voluntary PF contribution is a tax-free interest, and but in that case, if the contribution made by employee is very higher than the stipulated rate or stipulated percentage, then employer cannot match it. So this here there is a statutory regulation that employer can contribute only to the statutory limit of his percentage, that is percentage. Now, how the withdrawals can be made from the EPF account? As we know, after this settlement, like one has to retire from the service after 55 years of age. So, based on the conditions of his employment, it can be 58 years, 59 years, 60 years or 55 years. Based on his criteria of his employment, the age of retirement will be differing. So, the total here we have taken it as 55 years. So, the total EPF balance, whatever is there, including the interest that can be withdrawn, but there is a window to partially withdraw the amount for those nearing retirement. So, anyone who is above 54 years can withdraw up to 90% of the accumulated balance with interest. So, to withdraw money, one has to use UAN based form 19, and it is by the employer's signature is requirement. So this facility will be available to all subscribers whose universal account number, that is called as UAN, should be activated, and it should be complete with the KYC details, that is know your customer details like bank account and Aadhaar number. So the claim can be submitted through online portal that is called as Member Eva Seva. So this is a portal where you can file that, but with the signature of the employer, and the KYC norms, that is know your customer norms, and bank account and Aadhaar number has to be linked, because the payment will be made only through the bank account. This PF scheme, and this is to recap, as I told you, the statutory limit is 12% for employer and employee, but employer, if you want, he can contribute higher also. Suppose in case of family, in case of male, wife, children, dependent parents and deceased will be the family members. In case of female employee, her husband, children, dependent parents and husband's dependent parents and deceased and widow and children will be the dependent, they are called